It's not an accident that the Democrats are using the idea of increased competition as a weapon against the insurance companies. It is a potentially very effective weapon. It is plain old common sense. It is easier for business to make money when there's less competition, which is why the so-called public option is anathema to the insurance industry. Last night on the show, Senator Chuck Schumer made news by putting pressure on Majority Leader Harry Reid to protect the public option in the Senate's final health reform bill. Today, new heat came in the form of a full-page newspaper ad taken in today's Washington Post, USA Today, and other D.C. newspapers. The ad was taken out by 27 labor unions, including the AFL-CIO. It applauds reform efforts in Congress, but says, quote, "We aren't there yet." It refers to the proposal that came out of the Senate Finance Committee yesterday as, quote, "deeply flawed," and calls a public option essential to reform. Joining us now is Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO. Thanks for being in the studio.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks
I want you to confirm, or I want you to be able to speak to something that's been widely reported, that Rahm Emanuel has spoken out to the unions and asked you not to speak out publicly against health care reform that didn't include the public option. Did that actually happen?
No, he didn't ask us not to speak out or do an ad. We quibbled over a few words in the ad, but there was never any attempt to say don't do this or don't do that. That didn't happen.
Any pressure to take out this ad from inside your organization?
Not really. I mean, nobody said to us, don't take out the ad, because they knew we were going to do it. I mean, it was in our members' best interest. And this administration has never operated that way with us. They've never said, don't do this or don't do that. We operate sort of in respect for one another.
Let's talk about the public option. Is it a make or break issue?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, because there's right now, as your last guest said, American insurance companies have a stranglehold on the healthcare industry. In 96% of the markets, they're called highly concentrated, or there's one or two companies that control them. And as a result, profits have gone up 1,000% and premiums have gone up 300%. The only way to hold them accountable is to create competition, and the only way you can create competition is with a robust public option. When you do that, they'll face competition and they'll bring prices down. We'll save at least $100 billion in the process.
And so why is that? Tell me why that affects your union members directly. I mean, I understand why that affects the average person, but someone who's not in a union might not understand why that affects union members. So,
our members get health care from our employers generally, and the more our employers have to pay, the less competitive we are. If we have to compete with people around the world, it becomes more difficult. Moreover, we shouldn't be wasting money on things, no matter what the thing is, and we don't want our employers to spend an extra $100 billion on health care that we can get for $100 billion less that we can actually share.
So that ad is a very powerful statement. It says you folks mean business, that you're very, very serious about this. So how are you going to put this into action? Are you going to target, well, maybe target's too harsh a word, but are you going to focus on specific members of Congress? How are you going to go about making sure what you want happens?
Well, let me tell you what we did in just the last week. We brought in members from 27 different states, and they held over 100 meetings with senators just this week. We had 42,000 handwritten letters delivered to those senators, and we made 30,000 calls into those senators' offices. You will see that increase as time goes on, because we are closer than we've ever been to getting real health care reform, but we're not there yet. We still have a ways to go, and the model that we're dealing with is a flawed model.
So here's a provocative question. The amount of work and effort that you folks are putting into it, are you all that different from lobbyists for the insurance companies who are worried about their workers and their bottom line?
Well, I guess we're talking for the American public. A public option will save every American out there premiums on their health care. The requiring employers to pay their fair share will save about $200 billion and drive down costs for everybody out there. And arguing that there should be no taxes on working families because they negotiated health care or they have health care is in everybody's best interest. So while we're not speaking for the insurance companies, we're not speaking for more profit, we're speaking to save money for the American worker and the American citizen.
Now, we should point out not all unions signed on to your ad. The SEIU did not sign on to that particular advertisement. Why not? Is there a difference of opinion between the unions that did sign on and some of the unions that didn't? And what is that difference?
I don't think there was. First of all, the SEIU is not part of the AFL-CIO. This was an AFL-CIO effort, so they weren't part of that. I don't think there's any difference when it comes to health care. They agree that we need a public option. They agree that every employer ought to pay their fair share, and they agree that there shouldn't be any taxes. It was just not getting around to people and being able going to 70-some unions and getting everybody to sign on in the process.
Are you optimistic about this health care reform?
Yes, I am, because the American people are demanding it. And I think anybody who votes against it or tries to block it or tries to do things that will help insurance companies, I think is going to pay the price at the polls. I think that they ought to understand that their job is not to make insurance companies happy, it's to make Americans healthy. That's their job. That's why we sent them there. And I think ultimately we're going to get a health care bill that really is real health care. It's going to have a robust public option. It'll require all employers to pay their fair share, and I think it will not tax working Americans.
All right, we shall see. Richard Trumpkin, president of the AFL-CIO, thank you for coming into the studio tonight.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.